RT Kendall is with us today. He's a spiritual legend. 25 years at Westminster Chapel in London. You know, you talk about extraordinary works. These are the days of Elijah. This is RT's latest book. It's available on our e-store. You need to get it. His insights all through the life of Elijah are amazing, but your life's amazing.
Don't make the angels laugh.
I mean, when I read, you know, a Nazarene to a PhD at Southern to Westminster Chapel to having the pulpit of Lloyd Jones handed to you in 25 years, and then God releasing you into the charismatic world. I mean, and then your emphasis on the Spirit and the Word. How appropriate is that in Reformed theology? I mean, it just kind of fascinated me.
You know, it's very lonely because the charismatics are suspicious of me because of my Reformed theology, and all the Reformed evangelicals call me a charismatic, won't have anything to do with me. So thank you for having me on. You're very kind.
We're really honored to have you here. And I know David Maines, our great founder, thinks so much of you. Talk to us about These Are the Days of Elijah, extraordinary things happening.
Well, the last series I did at Westminster Chapel before we retired 10 years ago was Elijah. And the thing that moved me most about Elijah is how human he is. I can't prove this, but I suspect that most books on Elijah don't focus on the fact that he was so human, so ordinary, and took himself so seriously. And you were surprised that God used him.
Don't we all?
But the thing that helped me, I say to myself, if God could use Elijah, he can use me.
Right.
And so that's the thing about this book. It should encourage anybody to feel that no matter how human, frail, weak they are, there's hope that God can make you extraordinary. And so that was the reason.
What is the process? The book tracks Elijah's life, but what is the spiritual process in a believer's life where they move into the extraordinary?
Well, in most cases, God doesn't lead us from A to Z, but from A to B, B to C. And what Elijah could not have known is that he was being groomed for what would be his finest hour on Mount Carmel, when he would challenge the prophets of Baal. Now, when God first revealed himself to Elijah, he didn't say, look, I want you to go up to Mount Carmel right now. He couldn't have coped with that. He could not have. And with all of us, we could never imagine what God has in store for us. And the truth is, we're not ready. You know, the disciples said to Jesus, we're ready. And Jesus knew they weren't. And we all think we're ready. We're not. And we need a time of preparation. And Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, the best thing he ever said to me, the worst thing that can happen to a man is to succeed before he's ready. And so the person who's catapulted into fame almost always falls flat, whether it's a rock star or a minister. We all need preparation. And so this is what God did with Elijah. So that the day came, God looked down from heaven and said, I think you're ready now. And then even then, on Mount Carmel, Elijah almost blew it. He said, I alone am left. Wrong. He had just cooperated with Obadiah, who had hid all these prophets in caves. Right. There were many. But Elijah took himself so seriously. I alone am left. God could have said, stop, call the whole thing off. Elijah needs more help. But no, he went on with Elijah. And then sometime later, God sorted him out and said, oh, by the way, Elijah, you're not the only one. And God's that way with all of us. He doesn't wait until we're completely ready, but he does wait a while until we can be trusted. And so that's a lot of my book.
RT, is trusting being tested in trials? I mean, is it the furnace of adversity?
Yes, yes, and the disappointment. And you take when Elijah goes to this widow who has nothing, And when Elijah realizes she's the one that God has earmarked to take care of him, he does the most impertinent thing. And she's out of food and says, well, I want you to feed me. But it was a test for him, a test for her. And he couldn't have known for sure how it was going to go. And, but before he could go to Mount Carmel, he had to do something like that. Jesus said, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And so this was the least, and Elijah passed. And that's the way it works.
You know, when we take these Old Testament stories, I think about 1 Corinthians 10:11, that Paul said they were written for our admonition. Are there deeper lessons in these Old Testament stories and figures like Elijah that we're not discerning like we should?
Very likely. That's a good observation. We all need our time of testing. Look, Moses, when he realized who his brothers were and he wanted to identify with them, he just thought when he went and left the palace of Pharaoh and said, I've come to rescue you, he just thought they would be carrying him on their shoulders. And he did something to prove himself, and it backfired. And God says, Moses, you're not ready. You're going to need another 40 years. And 40 years later, then he starts to be used. And we all think we're ready. We think we're ready, but we're not.
RT, when did you enter the extraordinary dimension? Because your ministry is global, and you've had a lot of influence on a lot of people I know. How did you, in a paradigm like Elijah, enter into the unique world?
Well, I'll tell you something a lot of people don't know. A very, very short period of time before I went to Westminster Chapel, do you know what I did for a living? I was a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman. Who would have thought, when you saw me in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Coral Gables, Miami Beach, knocking on doors, hello, I'm RT Kendall. I've come to show you something new and different for your home. And all my fellow ministers and students that I was with in college, out in the ministry, and here I was selling vacuum cleaners. There was no hint that one day God would give me a world platform.
Was there a crisis spiritually in your own life that allowed you to enter to the fullness of God's Spirit?
Yes, and it happened early on, but then after that happened, God says, you're not ready yet. I think what you're referring to, I was pastor of a Nazarene church in Palmer, Tennessee. Also a student at Trevecca Nazarene College, now university. And one day, driving in my car on US 41, one Monday morning, the glory of the Lord filled the car. As I'm driving, there was Jesus interceding for me at the right hand of God, more real than you are at this moment. I burst into tears. I don't know how I was able to drive. When I get to heaven, I want to see a DVD replay of the whole thing. How I was able to drive for the next hour. The next thing I remember, 10 miles outside of Nashville, I saw the face of Jesus looking at me. As clearly as I'm looking, it only lasted 30 seconds, but it was real. Transformed my life. A surge of warmth entered into my chest. I could feel it. Zoop, zoop, in and out. And instantly, I knew I was eternally saved. And when I got back to Trevecca, I maybe not very wisely said this to everybody. What do you mean eternally saved? I mean saved. Oh no, you just got sanctified. Maybe that was true, but I am saved. The bottom line is my theology was turned upside down. I came into Reformed thinking overnight, thought I had discovered something new. And years later, I realized that this was not new. God was kindly just pulling me into a Reformed stream. But at the same time, once I met a lot of these Reformed people who were cessationists. You know that word?
Oh,
I mean, the miraculous ceased.
Yeah, right.
Everything
stopped with the apostles.
Yeah. And I thought, well, how could that, if this happened to me? They said, well, you just thought that. I said, if I just thought that, how come it taught me what you believe? And they couldn't answer me. So I was like a fish out of water wherever I went. So it was years. That's why I had to sell vacuum cleaners. And then one day it all came together, and here I am talking to you.
We've got a couple minutes left. I want you to just look right in the camera and for a minute or so, tell our viewers why they need this book and why they need to discern what God did through Elijah.
Well, at the very end of the book of James, James said that Elijah was just like us. The King James says a man of like passions, like we are. It's a way of saying that Elijah was very ordinary, very, very human. And what thrills me is that God could take Elijah, so frail, so proud, and who would have thought that God could use a man like that? And I would say to anybody listening to me, you may feel unqualified, not very spiritual, not very educated, not worthy. Listen, God is looking for the person least likely to be tapped on the shoulder for greatness. And if God could use me, He could use anybody. If He could use Elijah, He could use anybody. And so I've written this book to show that God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things.